Welcome to the Goku Report, and welcome to the first movie review in quite some time. Originally, several months back, I announced I would be beginning a series of reviews of apocalyptic film reviews with the beginning of the series called the Apocalypse series. However, I have decided instead to talk about a specific one of the apocalyptic tribulation period films that actually I have probably the most fond memories of. I saw this film two times in theater. Back when it was originally released. Now, the weird thing about this film is the fact it was originally released in 2001. And not the greatest time period in 2001, though, when it was released. But, with that said, this film was technically a sort of not, sequel to the original Omega Code film. Which, of course, like the first film now, one of the two main actors and characters in Omega Code 1 would not reprise the role or be involved in any shape or form in Omega Code 2, known as Megiddo or Megiddo, however you want to pronunciate it. I personally usually say Megiddo. But with that said, with Omega Code 2 Megiddo, when it comes down to it, now also like the first film, you don't have the secondary villain Michael Ironside, but instead you do still have the main antagonist, obviously. As this is sort of a reimagining, I guess you could say, a reinvention or look at the whole concept of a tribulation time period film. Now, just so you know, this is also based on a book by the same name. This film was funded by was surprisingly not funded by the same studio that was behind the original uh, Apocalypse films, as well as the one who funded also the original Left Behind films, based on the very popular books. Which was Cloud 10 Pictures, had nothing to do with the production of Omega Code 1 or 2. Omega Code 2 Megiddo was predominantly funded and backed a lot by the family that controlled TBN, the Trinity Broadcasting Network, which throughout the years, of course, has come to light a lot of corrupted stuff. Given the family of TBN used the money just to make themselves better, but not to get into off topic. Now, with the film itself, it's definitely an interesting sort of retelling of the belief and story that is mentioned in, of course, obviously, the Book of Revelations, which is where the actual story of the apocalypse or the tribulation, rapture, and everything. Now, unlike most apocalyptic type films, which obviously in detail in the beginning has stuff like with the whole people disappearing with rapture and stuff. Weirdly enough, this film does not actually have an actual rapture happen. Instead, it goes basically just in to the tribulation, which is very unique and different. Maybe why some of the more traditional conservative Christians and stuff were not the biggest fans of this film. I would say this film was designed and produced by maybe a few more secularists, I would say, Christians in mind, as well as maybe even some non-Christians were involved. Now, what makes this film actually worth watching? Why do I rank it of apocalyptic films? If I was to do a tier list or ranking, I would probably rank this as the single best, hands down, apocalyptic film I've seen. And I've seen probably about 11 or 12 apocalyptic films over the years. I would probably put Omega Code 1 somewhere mid-tier. But I give Omega Code 2 definitely high. Main reason is the main actor who plays the main character called Stone Alexander, which is portrayed by the great Shakespearean British actor, and may I add, very criminally underrated actor who's been many things throughout the years, including involved, funny enough, with also Michael Ironside in a few seasons called Sequest 2032. Fun fact. And that is Michael York, which, in my opinion, is one of the most criminally underrated actors in the past 20 years, by far, in my opinion. Uh, I've seen him in several different TV show appearances, cameos throughout the years, as also the actor who plays in the Apocalypse series, well, Apocalypse 2 through 4, as the main antagonist and Antichrist, of course, the great Nick Mancuso. But with that said, with the role of the character Stone Alexander, we see early on, basically, apparently his father, which lives in this really nice, fancy Virginia estate, is talking with politicians of the time in the 60s, as well as, well, I'd say probably around the early 60s, as well as talking with generals and stuff about that Nixon would not be present, talking about political discussions given Stone's father basically is this big medium TV mogul who basically dominates and controls the news and airways and stuff. Basically, he is pretty much modeled after Ted Turner, I would say, very much so. Especially given he would end up having a network and stuff, which is basically completely modeled after CNN, which of course Ted Turner started. But it is interesting, and of course they chose Virginia State for the U.S. location, though later on we also find out that Stone's father also has a estate, a castle in Rome, Italy. How convenient, given, of course, Rome has always been seen as a figurehead location for really the scene for the rise of the Antichrist. Is supposed to be, obviously, from most beliefs and stuff and hearsay and most theories, especially by people like, specifically, probably the biggest name at the time when this movie came out was among the theorists and religious communities, probably the biggest name would be the Van Ampe Ministries. Jack Van Ampe was the biggest name by far in the 90s and 2000s. But they would always talk about that the Antichrist would rise up to power through Europe. And specifically, some people believe through the European Union, others believe through the United Nations. Now, in this is kind of interesting because Stone Alexander is technically born as an American, but he is raised because of trying to burn the crib of his baby brother, because he hates his baby brother because his mother died in childbirth with his young brother. But it is kind of weird, like he ends up walking and stuff, sees matches over the fireplace. We see a fireplace, like fire engulf a young child Stone Alexander, and it looks like a little bit of flame goes up through his nose, goes in, and then it disappears the flame, and he has matches and lights, and thus the father ends up sending him off to basically prep school, a very strict European military school located in Italy, which makes sense. Location and everything. We see then, of course, he ends up going to this vacant, creepy-ass chapel in Italy by himself in the middle of the night, may I add, and walks off because of seeing like other kids in the dorms and stuff, other boys burn like a doll and stuff, and laughing and making fun of him, call him like a baby burner and stuff, and he just walks off and says under his breath, "Stupid." Goes to this eerie dark chapel. We see this man in a black cloak and these shadow hellhounds crawling around on the walls and ceiling in the chapel, and he ends up greeting and saying, "Young master, basically bless me so I may spread your message." He ends up cutting, dropping blood on the young Stone Alexander's forehead, and ends up somehow the blood goes upwards and creates an upside down cross on the child's forehead. Then we get like basically he says, basically, "I am Lord" in Latin. which is a very much, of course, a trope in apocalyptic films. Of course, the villain must always use, obviously, Latin. It's pretty much necessary for any apocalyptic films, for the most part. Though there are some, pretty much most Cloud 10 picture stuff doesn't go even through the effort of learning basic Latin. But Megiddo does, and I appreciate. Plus, at the very beginning, we see some other stuff, though, before the flashback to the past with the full-grown and now officially like Antichrist and stuff. But before that, we first see he is appointed as like into power into the European Union and stuff, raised by his now like the head over the Academy of Training. Ends up basically, unfortunately, he does not know the kind of person he is dealing with. Like when he discovers though that Stone, now a young adult, is interested in his daughter, obviously wants to protect, and talks about sending him away and stuff. Hellhound ends up coming face to face with the instructor and stuff, and basically states that I will allow you to keep your academy, and I will allow you to keep your most precious thing, your immortal soul. And basically, the Hellhound just stares like grim at the face of him, and then we see that he basically graduates for full honors and everything, and see his younger brother, which is rising up through prep school and stuff in America, getting into politics and stuff himself, and the father, which is now an aging media mogul. Then we see also some stuff in the future, a sort of, I guess you could say, their sort of take on like a Black Mass. Though I've seen actual record footage and stuff, and it's not quite the same. It's a little more over dramatic, but expected as much. But at least Michael York makes it very much worth watching and enjoying. He does a very good job at hemming it up as the with his Shakespearean experience and stuff from theater in England, and it makes him very enjoyable. And to me, he is the main reason to watch this movie. Him playing in the role of the Antichrist, honestly, is great. And to me, at the end of the day, that is what makes this movie stand out to any other apocalyptic films. Out of the almost dozen I've seen, by far this stands out the most because of Michael York. Really brings more to it and to the role, and does a great job as the villain. But we see also, it is interesting the fact the main character of the movie is the villain. It's quite interesting. Now, interesting thing is also in the film, when we start seeing during the tribulation and stuff, he talks with his like I guess you could say false prophet about like his that Stone's like younger brother still resists, which now has managed to earn his way up to being at the status of U.S. president, and which is quite interesting. And we have Stone, which is basically consolidated the European Union and the United Nations together into his own private organization. So basically, he controls the UN and the EU, both. Has all power consolidated under him. But he's like, and we start seeing asteroids and stuff falling, and he's like speaking up to the sky to God, like, yes, go ahead, teach them, give them tribulation, pour your wrath upon them. And he actually does make the scene really very memorable at the way he does and portrays the character. Also, the fact, interestingly, he also talks about, when talking about his, Stone's brother, he's like, well, at the great scheme of things, my earthly brother is nothing, really, because some of the viewpoints of stuff on this are from some other less mainstream religious groups in Christianity that believe that Jesus and Lucifer are brothers. From a perspective, though, I actually see where they're coming from. But it is quite interesting, really, when you get into it and look at definitely the theories and different stuff in it. But then we see this scale, sadly, some of the CG battle and stuff when we finally see, and it ends up the three nations that end up at the end in this big battle in Megiddo, which is, by the way, located something like between 60 to like 80 miles from Jerusalem, is where it's actually located. Which, of course, played a role in things in the past, actually. Back in the era, back many thousands of years prior in biblical era, as well as many other elements. But at the end, of course, we see that Stone's younger brother, obviously, apparently from the look of things, gets saved and uses U.S. military in order to, again, though we also in the movie are met with also the fact that Stone Alexander has a wife, but she doesn't really play a big key role really overall in the film, as obviously as though in the beginning of the film I felt like she'd be a bigger role than she really played, unfortunately, though was a role to motivate the younger brother of Stone at the end. It's quite interesting though at the end of the film, but we see this battle and the three nations that end up resisting the other seven nations, which of course talks about in Revelation, ends up consolidated into regions, 10 regions of the world. You have North America, you have basically Latin America as its own nation or whatever. So basically it's like Central American stuff, and I assume maybe also combined with South America, like Brazil and stuff. And then the other one, strangely enough, that is resist, at least in 2001 when this film was made, was China, which is kind of weird. Though I could see at the end of the day the fact China would resist maybe like a total global domination, just because the Chinese Communist Party would want to control everything themselves and not bend to the will of like European Western powers. So I could definitely see that. Though I don't see basically US and China teaming up pure and simple ever. I just don't see it happening. Unless the Chinese Communist Party collapses. That's the only way. But with that said, it is an interesting battle. We see stuff get blown up, and we think maybe Stone is dead, but then he comes up from the ashes and stuff and tells the younger brother of Stone, "So, you think you know me?" and starts mentioning names and stuff like Satan, Lucifer. And you see what looks like wings and stuff popping out of Stone's head. Popping out and blows the body apart and takes the form of basically a giant gargoyle. Kind of, at the time when I saw it, I was kind of thought, he looks like a more powerful, like a more sort of badass version of a certain boss from a fighting game named Gargos from Mortal Kombat Gold. That's what I was thinking when I saw it. But at the end of the day, really, if I had to give a rating to this film, basically just basing it of apocalyptic movie rating, not overall movie rating, I would probably give this, honestly, an A+ of apocalyptic films. By far the best, in my opinion. In the future, I'll talk about some of the others. Some of the others I would say I do like quite a bit. Films like Tribulation, also known as Apocalypse 3, mostly because I did appreciate the fact it had individuals in the film, like brief cameos from like Margot Kidder, as well as Howie Mandel, and also, I forget his name, also one of the main characters in the film, played by. But it's actually quite interesting. But I'll talk about that in the future when I get to the Apocalypse series. On an overall film rating, what do I give Megiddo? I probably give this film, honestly, a C+ to a B-. I still think it's a pretty enjoyable film for me, and I do like apocalyptic films, and these type of films I find interesting, and Michael York is really the shining part of this film is why I look back. I've seen this film probably close to 20 times throughout the years. Fun fact also, you can watch this movie for free here on YouTube. So if you get a chance, check it out. I mean, you can watch it for free, might as well take advantage. But with that said, I'll see y'all next time. Same YouTube time, same YouTube channel. See you again here on the Goku Report. Hopefully enjoyed this and future movie reviews. I will probably be wearing this blockbuster shirt I picked up for my movie reviews. But with that said, stay safe. Hopefully enjoy the music in the background shows from Resident Evil 2. The police station main thing. Anyways, I'll see you again. Seriously, check out Megiddo. Also, just check out some acting work and stuff from Michael York. It's definitely worth your time. But see you again soon enough.